Welcome to the Deep Dive.
It's good to be here.
So today we are tearing into a stack of sources that all point to one of the most practical and I think foundational guides to, well, organizational life and doctrine ever written.
You're talking about the first letter of Paul to Timothy.
Exactly, one of the pastoral epistles. And we're going to treat this text for you, our listener, almost like a divine operating manual.
It really is a fascinating document. I mean, our mission here is pretty direct. We're extracting the foundational principles for, maintaining a healthy church structure, pure doctrine, and godly conduct.
And all from instructions meant for a young pastor.
A young pastor named Timothy, leading a really difficult congregation in a really difficult city. But what makes this so potent, even 2,000 years later, is that the human being just hasn't changed.
The problems are the same.
The problems persist, which means Paul's instructions, they act as these incredibly safe markers for enduring principles.
That immediately grounds this ancient guide in our modern reality. Paul didn't just write this in a vacuum.
Well,
He wrote it because Timothy was completely overwhelmed by a crisis in a massive metropolis. So let's set the scene. Ephesus.
Ephesus was the capital of Asia Minor. It was a massive urban center, a nexus of trade, wealth, culture. But culturally, it was just saturated with what sources call strong mysticism and prominent idolatry.
And it was dominated by the Temple of Diana, right?
Yeah.
One of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
It was, and that dominated the city religiously and economically.
And that worship of Diana, it wasn't just theological. It was deeply ingrained in the city's social fabric and, well, often associated with powerful sexual instincts, leading to this widespread moral license.
And Timothy is trying to lead a Christian community right in the middle of that storm. And the pastor himself was, well, hardly an intimidating figure. The sources describe Timothy as young and notably
Timid, right? And sickly, I think I read.
exactly, timid and sickly. He was Paul's trusted companion, but he needed a lot of encouragement. He was prone to these bouts of discouragement.
So you have a young, insecure pastor in charge of this really strategic church, planted in a hyper-pagan city, and he's dealing with intense internal problems.
Yes. And the solutions Paul offered for all of that, the false teachers, the leadership demands, the social tensions, that's why this ancient letter is still such a living text for us.
Which brings us directly to the first and probably greatest threat Paul addresses.
The lethal poison.
Yes, the lethal poison of internal false doctrine. Paul basically says the real danger isn't persecution from Rome, it's internal decay.
It's internal corruption leading to apostasy, a deliberate theological abandonment of the faith.
And that theological corruption sounds like it was a really dangerous, contradictory mix. What was the specific makeup of this theological cocktail?
It was a destructive hybrid. Paul warns against, and this is his phrase, spirits of deceit and doctrines of demons. So on one side, you had elements of Jewish legalism.
Meaning?
Teachers who were obsessed with endless disputes about genealogies, obscure laws, Jewish fables, all focused on exterior rituals.
But then mixed into that, you have the much more insidious threat, the Gnostic elements.
Exactly. This early proto-Gnosticism was characterized by what you could call speculative intellectualism. They argued that salvation didn't come through faith in Christ, but through some kind of secret, esoteric knowledge.
And that kind of belief system, it just breeds arrogance.
It does. You become superior because you hold the secret key.
So what was the core error that created all the ethical problems that followed?
It all boils down to the denial of the goodness of creation, specifically matter. The Gnostics believed matter was intrinsically evil and only spirit was good.
And if you deny the goodness of creation,
You end up rejecting fundamental Christian doctrines like the resurrection. I mean, why would a good God restore an evil body? It just doesn't follow. And this toxic worldview then led to 2 completely contradictory ethical extremes.
the first being extreme discipline, right? Rigorous asceticism.
Yes, if the body is evil, you have to punish it. So they established these heavy external rules, specifically demanding abstinence from certain foods and, surprisingly, forbidding marriage.
They thought they were being more spiritual by depriving the body.
That's right. And then you have the second extreme, which seems like the complete opposite.
Yes. Total moral license.
It's a paradox, isn't it? They argued that because the body was evil and didn't matter, well, actions done with the body also didn't matter.
Which is a convenient excuse for depravity.
It is. And the sources specifically note that these false teachers were seducing vulnerable women, using their doctrines as a cover for their own immorality.
And if we dig into the motive here, it wasn't some sincere intellectual discovery, was it?
Not even close. The ultimate drive was just pure profit. The false teachers were motivated by an insatiable greed.
Making a business of the faith.
Absolutely. Merchandising the word, as our sources put it. The lure of financial gain was driving them to introduce these destructive doctrines.
That really hits home today. That mixture of intellectual arrogance, legalism, and financial opportunism is, well, it's still around.
It is.
So if the poison is this false doctrine rooted in greed, what does Paul prescribe as the antidote?
It's actually a bit counterintuitive. The antidote isn't just to have a better argument or to engage in more intellectual sparring.
It's more than that.
Much more. Paul tells Timothy to combat error, not just with facts, but through genuine love. A love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and sincere faith. The truth has to be defended, but it has to be rooted in integrity. The messenger matters just as much as the message.
That transition from correcting doctrine to regulating public presentation feels very deliberate. After establishing the danger within, Paul pivots to public worship.
And he starts with prayer.
Right. He places prayer before all things, emphasizing its primary importance in the church's life.
It's a powerful statement. It grounds the whole life of the congregation, not in, performance or ritual, but in communication with God. And what's fascinating is the scope of this prayer.
It's for everyone.
For all men, without distinction, including kings and political authorities.
That must have been a tough pill to swallow, considering who was in power at the time.
It was. This command included praying for figures like the Emperor Nero, who was actively persecuting Christians.
So what was the goal of that prayer? Not necessarily regime change, then?
No, the goal was more practical. It was so the church could lead a quiet and peaceful life. It was a means of survival and flourishing under very difficult rulers.
And concerning the conduct of the people praying, the men Paul seems to focus heavily on their internal attitude.
He does. He says men should pray, lifting holy hands, free from anger and contention. It's a call for reconciliation before you even start to worship.
So the inner state, the pure heart, is more important than the physical posture.
Exactly. Who you are internally matters more than how you stand externally.
Okay, now let's turn to the instruction for women's conduct in worship. This part of a letter has been historically challenging, and it really requires some careful contextualization.
It has generated enormous discussion, and we have to handle it by sticking closely to the source material's context. First, he addresses attire.
Right. Women are told to dress with modesty and good sense, avoiding extravagance. He gets very specific. Elaborate hairstyles, gold, expensive clothing.
Yes, and the question is why? Why such specific warnings?
It's not just a general prohibition on all nice things, is it?
No, it seems to be a safeguard against specific issues in first-century Ephesus. It was a wealthy city. Ostentatious displays of gold and these incredibly complex hair arrangements, they risked provoking envy.
And showcasing excessive wealth.
Right, in an environment where many of the new converts were poor or even slaves. Paul is directing them away from a status display and toward inner character. The true adornment, he says, is good works and a quiet spirit.
Then we get to the most controversial part, the instruction against women teaching or having authority over men in the public assembly. How does the text ground this?
Well, Paul explicitly says he does not permit it. And the rationale he gives is rooted in two theological points. First, the order of creation, Adam was formed first. Then Eve, and second, the nature of the fall, Eve was deceived.
So the core principle seems to be about maintaining masculine leadership in that specific context of a public church gathering.
That's how it's presented.
Yeah.
But if we look at the wider context of the sources, this isn't a blanket prohibition on women teaching at all, is it?
No, that's the nuance that's often missed.
Women are clearly expected to teach children and younger women. So the instruction here seems to relate to the specific function of public, authoritative church leadership, consistent with the principle of submission to that leadership.
Understanding that historical context is just critical to interpreting Paul's intent here. Okay, let's switch gears to the official structure of the church. The high standards set for leadership. Aspiring to the office of elder or bishop is described as desiring an excellent work.
And the Moody takeaway from that phrasing is that the role is about service. It's not about status or promotion. It's work.
And the qualifications Paul lays out, they're overwhelmingly focused on moral excellence and character, not intellectual ability.
Yes, only one qualification is directly about teaching skill. The rest is about who the person is.
This focus on character seems designed specifically to prevent the rise of leaders who look like those greedy, arrogant, false teachers we talked about earlier.
It's a direct institutional defense mechanism. Look at the primary moral checks. They start at home. The elder must be faithful, the husband of one wife, and he must govern his own house well.
And why is the family the litmus test?
Because the family is the first flock. It's the training ground. Paul is blunt about it. If a man can't care for his own family, he is absolutely disqualified from caring for God's house.
And the financial integrity requirement, that directly counters the false teacher's defining vice.
It does. The elder must not be violent or contentious. He has to be an amiable peacemaker. But crucially, he must not be a lover of money. He can't be avaricious. This prevents that same financial corruption from getting a foothold in the leadership.
The public witness is also non-negotiable.
Paramount. He must be irreproachable, literally, without having anywhere to catch him in wrongdoing, and he must have good testimony from those outside the church. His reputation has to be solid.
And mature, not a new convert.
Right, to avoid that temptation of pride that can come with sudden authority.
And the deacons, the original servants of assistance, they have similar, really stringent standards.
They do. Deacons handle logistics and the church's funds for social assistance, so integrity was everything. They had to be respectable, consistent in their word, and importantly, not greedy for sordid gain.
And they had to be tested first.
Yes, Paul mandates that they must first be proven through an experimental period. Testing comes before the official ministry.
Okay, let's move finally to the delicate and necessary complexity of pastoral care and discipline. This is where Paul gets very specific with Timothy. How is a pastor supposed to apply correction?
With immense tact. The biblical truth has to be delivered in a loving manner. Older members, especially, must be approached gently. Elders exhorted as a father, older women as mothers.
And younger people as brothers and sisters.
Yes, with all purity, which was a critical instruction given the sexual environment of Ephesus.
Now, in terms of social assistance, Paul makes a really careful and I think difficult distinction about widows.
He demands discernment, yes. First, there are the truly needy widows, those who lack family support and rely entirely on God and the church. And Paul has a harsh word for their relatives.
He says any family member who fails to care for their own is acting worse than an unbeliever.
He does. Then there's the second group of widows.
The ones enrolled for church service.
Exactly. Often 60 years or older, who had a proven, lifelong reputation for good works, raising children, hospitality, helping the afflicted. But younger widows, he says, should not be enrolled.
Why not?
Because idleness can lead to gossip, moral temptation, and it puts an unnecessary burden on the church's budget. He says they should be encouraged instead to marry, bear children, and manage the house.
The discipline for recognized leaders is also handled differently and required extraordinary impartiality from Timothy.
And that impartiality is such a tough mandate, but it's absolutely necessary for institutional health. Public sins of a leader must be publicly corrected in the presence of all.
It serves two purposes then: accountability and a warning to others.
Right, to instill caution in others. And Timothy is charged to administer this discipline without prejudice, doing nothing with partiality. That's the ultimate test of moral courage for a pastor.
And after all of these heavy, complex instructions on doctrine and discipline, Paul ends this section with a moment of very personal, very human advice for Timothy.
I love this detail. It really shows the heart of pastoral care. Paul's concern extends beyond the spiritual mandate to Timothy's physical health. He writes, "Stop drinking only water, but use a little wine for your stomach and frequent ailments."
It's a quiet reminder that leaders are physical beings who need practical care.
For their bodies as well as their souls.
That grounding in human need is a powerful way to end the instruction. So we've covered the fight against false doctrine, order in worship, the high standards for leadership, and wise pastoral care. What is the ultimate unifying mandate that Paul issues here?
The ultimate mandate is to be the defender and the clarifier of the truth. Paul defines the church as the column and foundation of the truth.
So it's not just about defending it.
No, it's about holding that truth up high, clearly and visibly, for the world to see and to navigate by.
And as we close this deep dive, let's revisit that provocative thought Paul offers, contrasting two kinds of discipline that are still so relevant.
Physical exercise profits little, but piety is profitable for everything.
Because it has the promise of life that now is and of that which is to come.
That just raises a critical question about priority, doesn't it? Paul acknowledges physical exercise has some benefit, but he argues that piety, that reverence for God expressed in godly conduct, is infinitely more valuable. Its rewards are eternal.
So the question for us is,
how often do we, in our modern world, meticulously prioritize temporary, visible self-improvement, our gym time, our diets, our social status, over the eternal, often unseen discipline of piety. If piety promises success both in this life and the next, what does the ratio of our daily effort really reveal about our true, enduring priorities?
Something to mull over as you reflect on the high calling of structure and truth. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.